The Bisser-Frieden-Josephson criteria pays a great deal of attention to the incoherence present in the letter, the dissatisfaction with the self, and most of all the pain Navidson still feels over the image he burned into the retina of America almost 2 decades ago. As was already mentioned in Chapter 2, before the release of the Navidson record, neither friends nor family nor colleagues knew that Delial was the name Navidson had given to the starving Sudanese child. For reasons of his own, he never revealed Delial's identity to anyone, not even to Karen. Billy Reston thought she was some mythological pin-up girl. I didn't know. I sure as hell never connected the name with that photo. Note 368, Billy Reston, interviewed by Anthony Sitney on Evening Murmurs, KTWL, Boulder, Colorado, January 4th, 1996. The Navidson record solved a great mystery when it included Karen's shot of the name written on the back of the print, as well as Navidson's letter. For years, photojournalists and friends had wondered who Delial was and why she meant so much to Navidson. Those who had asked usually received one of several responses. I forget. Someone close to me. Allow a man a little mystery. Or just a smile. Quite a few colleagues accused Navidson of being enigmatic on purpose, and so, out of spite, let the subject drop. Few were disappointed when they learned that Delial referred to the subject of his Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph. It made perfect sense to me, said Purdom Huckler of the New York Times. That must have been a crushing thing to witness, and he paid the price too. Note 369, personal interview with Purdom Huckler, February 17th, 1995, and Note 369. Lindsay Gerknard commented, Navidson ran straight into the brick wall all great photojournalists inevitably run into. Why aren't I doing something about this instead of just photographing it? And when you asked that question, you hurt. Note 370, personal interview with Lindsay Gerknard, February 24th, 1995, and Note 370. Psychologist Hector Iosa took Gerknard's observation a little further when he pointed out at the LA Times Convention on Media Ethics last March, photojournalists especially must never underestimate the power and influence of their images. You may be thinking, I've done nothing in this moment except take a photo. True. But realize you have also done an enormous amount for society at large. Also true. Note 371, Hector Iosa speaking at the LA Times Convention on Media Ethics on March 14th, 1996. End note 371. Nor did evaluations of Navidson's burden stop with comments made by his associates. Academia soon marched in to interrogate the literary consequences created by the Delial revelation. Tokiko Dudek commented on how Delial is to Navidson what the albatross is to Coleridge's Mariner. In both cases, both men shot their mark, only to be haunted by the accomplishment, even though Navidson did not actually kill Delial. Note 372. See Tokiko Dudek's Harbingers of Hell and or Hope in Authenti's Journal, Palomar College, September 1995, page 7. Also consider Larry Burrows, who in the 1969 BBC film Beautiful, Beautiful remarked, So often I wonder whether it is my right to capitalize, as I feel so often, on the grief of others. But then I justify, in my own particular thoughts, by feeling that I can contribute a little to the understanding of what others are going through. Then there is a reason for doing it. End note 372. Caroline Filippino recognized intrinsic elements of penance in Navidson's return to the house, but she preferred Dante to Coleridge. Delial serves the same role as Beatrice. Her whispers lead Navidson back to the house. She is all he needs to find. After all, locating, literally, the souls of the dead equals safety and loss. Note 373, Caroline Filippino's Sex Equations, Granta, Fall 1995, page 45, and Note 373. However, unlike Dante, Navidson never encountered his Beatrice again. Note 374. During exploration number 5, Navidson had no illusion about what he would find there. While staring into those infernal halls, we can hear him mutter, Lazarus is dead again. End note 374. In the most sardonic tones, Sandy Beale of the New Criticism once considered how contemporary cinema would have treated the subject of Navidson's guilt. If the Navidson record had been a Hollywood creation, Delial would have appeared at the heart of the house. Like something out of Lost Horizon, dark fields would have given way to Elysian fields, the perfect setting for a musical number with a brightly costumed Delial front and center, drinking Shirley Temples, swinging on the arms of Tom and Jed, backed by a chorus line which would have included Holloway and everyone else in Navidson's life, and our life for that matter, who had ever died. Plenty of root beer and summer love, note 375, see Appendix F, end note 375, to go around. Note 376, Sandy Beale's No Horizon, in The New Criticism, Volume 13, November 3rd, 1993, page 49, end note 376. But the Navidson record is not a Hollywood creation, and through the course of the film, Delial appears only once, in Karen's piece, bordered in black, frozen in place without music or commentary, just Delial, a memory, a photograph, an artifact. To this day, the treatment of Delial by the Bista Frieden-Josephson criteria is still considered harsh and particularly insensate toward international tragedy. While Navidson's empathy for the child is not entirely disregarded, the criteria asserts that she soon exceeded the meaning of her own existence. Memory, experience, and time turned her bones into a trope for everything Navidson had ever lost. The BFJ criteria posits that Delial's prominence in Navidson's last letter is a repressive mechanism enabling him to, at least on a symbolic level, deal with his nearly inexpressible loss. After all, in a very short amount of time, Navidson had seen the rape of physics. He had watched one man murder another and then pull the trigger on himself. He had stood helplessly by as his own brother was crushed and consumed. And finally, he had watched his lifelong companion flee to her mother, and probably another lover, taking with her his children and bits of his sanity. It is not by accident that all these elements appear like ghosts in his letter. A more permanent end to his relationship with Karen seems to be implied when he writes, "I'm leaving tomorrow," and describes his missive as a will. His invocation of the memory of the members of the first team, as well as others, sounds almost like a protracted goodbye. Navidson is tying up loose ends, and the reason, or so the BFJ criteria claims, can be detected in the way he treats the Sudanese girl still haunting his past. It is no coincidence that, as Navidson begins to dwell on Delial, he mentions his brother 3 times. "I had no one to pass her to. There was no window to pass her through out of harm's way. There was no Tom there. I was no Tom there. Tom. Maybe he's the one I'm looking for." It is a harrowing admission full of sorrow and defeat. I was no Tom there. Seeing his brother as the life-saving and line-saving hero he himself was not. Note 377. Here then Jacob loses Esau and finds he is nothing without him. He is empty, lost, and tumbling toward his own annihilation. But as Robert Hurt poignantly asks in Esau and Jacob, BITTW Publications, 1969, page 389, what did God really know about brothers, or for that matter sisters? He was, after all, an only child, and before it all, an equally lonely father. Endnote 377. Thus, the Bista Frieden-Josephson criteria staunchly refutes the Kellogg-Antwerp claim by reiterating its argument that Navidson's return to the house was not at all motivated by the need to possess it, but rather to be obliterated by it. Then, on January 6, 1997, the assemblage of cultural diagnosticians sponsored by the American Psychiatric Association held in Washington, D.C., a husband and wife team brought before an audience of 1,200 the Haven Slokum theory, which in the eyes of many successfully deflated the prominence of both the Kellogg-Antwerp claim and the infamously influential Bista Frieden-Josephson criteria. Ducking the semantic conceits of prior hypotheses, the Haven Slokum theory proposed to first focus primarily on the house itself and its generation of physiological effects, how this direction would resolve the question of why Navidson returned to the house alone, they promised to show in due course. Relying on an array of personal interviews, closely inspected secondary sources, and their own observations, the married couple began to carefully adumbrate their findings in what has since become known as the Haven Slokum Anxiety Scale, or more simply as PEER. Rating the level of discomfort experienced following any exposure to the house, the Haven Slokum theory assigned a number value 0 for no effect, and 10 for extreme effects. Post-exposure effects rating, 0 to 1, Alicia Rosenbaum, sudden migraines. 0 to 2, Audrey McCulloch, mild anxiety. 2 to 3, Tepet C. Brooks, insomnia. 3 to 4, Sheriff Axnard, nausea, suspected ulcer. Note, no previous history of stomach ailments. 4 to 5, Billy Reston, enduring sensation of cold. 5 to 6, Daisy, excitement, intermittent fever, scratches, echolalia. 6 to 7, Kirby Wax Hook, stupor, enduring impotence. Note, neither the bullet wound nor the surgery should have affected potency. 7 to 8, Chad, tangentiality, rising aggression, persistent wandering. 9, Karen Green, prolonged insomnia, frequent unmotivated panic attacks, deep melancholia, persistent cough. Note, all of which radically diminished when Karen began work on What Some Have Thought and A Brief History of Who I Love. 10, Will Navidson, obsessive behavior, weight loss, night terrors, vivid dreaming accompanied by increased mutism. The Haven Slokum theory, TM, 1. The Haven Slokum theory does not lightly pass over Karen's remarkable victory over the effects of the house. With the eventual exception of Navidson, she was the only one who attempted to process the ramifications of that place. The labor she put into both film shorts resulted in more moderate mood swings, an increase in sleep, and an end to that nettlesome cough. Navidson, however, despite his scientific inquiries and early postulations, finds no relief. He grows quieter and quieter, often wakes up seized by terror, and through Christmas and the New Year starts eating less and less. Though he frequently tells Reston how much he longs for Karen and the company of his children, he is incapable of going to them. The house continues to fix his attention. So much so that back in October, when Navidson first came across the tape of Wax kissing Karen, he hardly responded. He viewed the scene twice, once at regular speed, the second time on fast forward, and then moved on to the rest of the footage without saying a word. From a dramatic point of view, we must realize it is a highly anticlimactic moment, but one which, as the Haven Slokum theory argues, only serves to further emphasize the level of damage the house had already inflicted upon Navidson. Normal emotional reactions no longer apply. The pain anyone else would have felt while viewing that screen kiss, in Navidson's case, has been blunted by the grossly disproportionate trauma already caused by the house. In this regard, it is in fact a highly climactic, if irregular moment, only because it is so disturbing to watch something so typically meaningful, rendered so utterly inconsequential. How tragic to find Navidson so bereft of energy, his usual snap and alacrity of thought replaced by such unyielding torpor. Nothing matters any more to him, which, as more than a handful of people have already observed, is precisely the point. Then, at the beginning of March, while tests on the wall samples progressed, as the Haven Slokum theory observes, Navidson begins to eat again, work out, and though his general reticence continues, Reston still sees Navidson's new behavior as a change for the better. I was blind to his intentions. I thought he was starting to deal with Tom's death, planning to end his separation with Karen. I figured he had put the Fowler letters behind him, along with that kiss. He seemed like he was coming back to life. Hell, even his feet were on the mend. Little did I know he was stockpiling equipment, getting ready for another journey inside. What everyone knows now was exploration number 5. Note 378, interview with Billy Reston, KTWL, Boulder, Colorado, January 4th, 1996, end note. Where the Bista-Frieden-Josephson criteria made Navidson's letter to Karen the keystone of its analysis, the Haven Slokum theory does away with the document in a footnote, describing it as drunken babble chock full of expected expressions of grief, re-identification with a lost object, and plenty of transference, having less to do with Navidson's lost brother, and more to do with the maternal absence he endured throughout his life. The desire to save Delial must partly be attributed to a projection of Davidson's own desire to be cradled by his mother. Therefore, his grief fuses his sense of self with his understanding of the other, causing him not only to mourn for the tiny child, but for himself as well. Note 379, see pages 22 to 3, end note 379. What the Haven Slokum theory treats with greater regard are the three dreams. Note 380. As such a great variety of written material outside of the Haven Slokum theory has been produced on the subject of Navidson's dreams, it seems imprudent not to at least mention here a few of the more popular ones. Calvin Udovsky's D-sleep, S-sleep trauma, differentiating between sleep terror disorder and nightmare disorder in N.R.E.M., Bethel, Ohio, Bessenung Books, 1995, Ernest Y. Hartman's Terrible Thoughts, The Psychology and Biology of Navidson's Nightmares, New York, Basic Books Incorporated, 1996. Susan Beck's Imposition on the Hollow, published in the T.S. Eliot Journal, Volume 32, November 1994. Chapter 4 in Una Fanny D'Arte's The Constancy of Carl Jung, Baltimore, Maryland, Johns Hopkins University Press, 1995. Gordon Kearns, L. Kajita, and M.K. Totsuka's Ultra Pure Water, The Super Kamiokande Detector, and Cherenkov Light, W.H. Freeman and Company, 1997. Also see www.sk.ic.ru-tokyo.ac.jp/doc/sk/. And of course, Tom Curie's essay, Thou Talk'st of Nothing. True, I Talk of Dreams. Mab Weekly, Celtic Publications, September 1993. Endnote 380. Navidson described for us in the High 8 journal entries he made that March, again quoting directly from the theory. Far better than words influenced by the depressive effects of alcohol, these intimate glimpses of Navidson's psyche reveal more about why he decided to go back, and what may account for the profound physiological consequences that followed once he was inside. Mia Haven entitles her analysis of dream number 1, Wishing Well, a penny for your thoughts, a quarter for your dreams, you for the aeons. Unfortunately, as her treatment is difficult to find and purportedly exceeds 180 pages, it is only possible to summarize the contents here. As Haven recounts, Navidson's first dream places him within an enormous concrete chamber. The walls, ceiling, and floor are all veined with mineral deposits and covered in a thin, ever-present film of moisture. There are no windows or exits. The air reeks of rot, mildew, and despair. Everywhere people wander aimlessly around, dressed in soiled togas. Toward the center of this room there lies what appears to be a large well. A dozen people sit on the edge, dangling their feet inside. As Navidson approaches this aperture, he realizes two things. One, he has died, and this is some kind of halfway station. And two, the only way out is down through the well. As he sits on the edge, he beholds a strange and very disconcerting sight. No more than 20 feet below is the surface of an incredibly clear liquid. Navidson presumes it is water, though he senses it is somewhat more viscous. By some peculiar quality intrinsic to itself, this liquid does not impede, but actually clarifies the impossible vision of what lies beneath. A long shaft descending for miles, ultimately opening up into a black bottomless pit, which instantly fills Navidson with an almost crippling sense of dread. Suddenly, next to him, someone leaps into the well. There is a slight splash, and the figure begins to sink slowly but steadily toward the darkness below. Fortunately, after a few seconds, a violent blue light envelops the figure and transports it somewhere else. Navidson realizes, however, that there are other figures down there who have not been visited by that blue light, and are instead writhing in fear as they continue their descent into oblivion. Without anyone telling him, Navidson somehow understands the logic of the place. 1. He can remain in that awful room for as long as he likes, even forever if he chooses. Looking around, he can tell that some people have been there for thousands of years. Or he can jump into the well. 2. If he has lived a good life, a blue light will carry him to some ethereal and gentle place. If, however, he has lived an inappropriate life, Navidson's words, no light will visit him, and he will sink into the horrible blackness below, where he will fall forever. The dream ends with Navidson attempting to assess the life he has led, unable to decide whether he should or should not leap. Haven goes to great lengths to examine the multiple layers presented by this dream, whether the classical inferences in the togas or the sexless figure Navidson observes immolated by the blue light. She even digresses for a playful romp through Sartre's Huis clos, hinting how that formidable work helped shape Navidson's imagination. In the end, though, her most important insight concerns Navidson's relationship to the house. The concrete chamber resembles the ashen walls, while the bottomless pit recalls both the spiral staircase and the abyss that appeared in his living room the night Tom died. Still, what matters most is not some discovery made within those walls, but rather within himself. In Haven's words, the dream seems to suggest that in order for Navidson to properly escape the house, he must first reach an understanding about his own life, one he still quite obviously lacks. For dream number 2, Lance Slocum provides the widely revered analysis entitled At a Snail's Place. Since his piece, like Haven's, is also impossible to locate, and reportedly well over 200 pages long, summary will again have to suffice. Slocum retells how in the second dream, Navidson finds himself in the center of a strange town where some sort of feast is in progress. The smell of garlic and beer haunts the air. Everyone is eating and drinking, and Navidson understands that for some undisclosed reason, they will now have enough food to last many decades. When the feast finally comes to an end, everyone grabs a candle and begins to march out of the town. Navidson follows and soon discovers that they are heading for a hill on which lies the shell of an immense snail. This sight brings with it a new understanding. The town has slain the creature, eaten some of it, and preserved the rest. As they enter the enormous wind, as in to wind something up, their candlelight illuminates walls that are white as pearl and as opalescent as seashells. Laughter and joy echoes up the twisting path, and Navidson recognizes that everyone has come there to honor and thank the snail. Navidson, however, keeps climbing up through the shell. Soon he is alone, and as the passageway continues to get tighter and tighter, the candle he holds grows smaller and smaller. Finally, as the wick begins to sputter, he stops to contemplate whether he should turn around or continue on. He understands if the candle goes out, he will be thrust into pitch darkness. Though he also knows finding his way back will not be difficult. He gives serious thought to staying. He wonders if the approaching dawn will fill the shell with light. Slocum begins with an amusing reference to Dr. Dolittle, before turning to consider the homes which ancient Ammonites, note 381, see Edouard Monod-Herzen's Principes de Morphologie Générale, Volume 1, Paris, Gauthier-Villard, 1927, page 119, and note 381, constructed around an almost logarithmic axis, a legacy they would, eons later, bestow upon the imagination of countless poets and even entire cultures. Note 382. For example, even today, the Kitawans of the South Pacific view the spiral of the Nautilus Pompilius as the ultimate symbol of perfection. End note 382. Primarily, Slocum concentrates on Chapter 5 of Bachelard's The Poetics of Space, as translated by Maria Jonas, Boston, Beacon Press, 1994, choosing to allow Navidson's dream the same consideration literature of its kind receives. For example, Slocum views the question of Navidson's personal growth in terms of the enigma posed by the snail before it was eventually solved. Here he quotes from the translated Bachelard text. How can a snail grow in its stone prison? This is a natural question, which can be asked quite naturally. I should prefer not to ask it, however, because it takes me back to the questions of my childhood. But for the Abbé de Vallemont, it is a question that remains unanswered. And he adds, when it is a matter of nature, we rarely find ourselves on familiar ground. At every step, there is something that humiliates and mortifies proud minds. In other words, a snail's shell, this house that grows with its inmate, is one of the marvels of the universe. And the Abbé de Vallemont concludes that, in general, shells are sublime subjects of contemplation for the mind. Note 383. The original text. Comment le petit escargot dans sa prison de pierre peut-il grandir? Voilà une question naturelle, une question qui se pose naturellement. Nous n'aimons pas à la faire, car elle nous renvoie à nos questions d'enfant. Cette question reste sans réponse pour l'abbé de Vallemont qui ajoute « Dans la nature, on est rarement en paix de connaissance. Il y a à chaque pas de quoi humilier et mortifier les esprits superbes. Autrement dit, la coquille de l'escargot La maison qui grandit à la mesure de son hôte est une merveille de l'univers, et d'une manière générale, conclut l'abbé de Vallemont. Abbé de Vallemont, Curiosité de la nature et de l'art sur la végétation ou l'agriculture et le jardinage dans leur perfection. Paris, 1709, première partie, page 255. Les coquillages sont de sublimes sujets de contemplation pour l'esprit. For a more modern treatment of shell growth, see Geerat J. Vermeij's A Natural History of Shells, Princeton, N.J., Princeton University Press, 1993. Chapter 3, The Economics of Construction and Maintenance, deals directly with matters of calcification and the problems of dissolution, while Chapter 1, Shells and the Questions of Biology, considers the sense of the shell in a way that differs slightly from Vallemont's. We can think of shells as houses. Construction, repair, and maintenance by the builder require energy and time, the same currencies used for such other life functions as feeding, locomotion, and reproduction. The energy and time invested in shells depend on the supply of raw materials, the labor costs of transforming these resources into a serviceable structure, and the functional demands placed on the shell. The words economics and ecology are especially apt in this context, for both are derived from the Greek oikos, meaning house. In short, the questions of biology can be phrased in terms of supply and demand, benefits and costs, and innovation and regulation, all set against a backdrop of environment and history. End note 383.